Well, hello, my friend, and welcome to Book Talks with Keith. I'm your host, author J. Keith Brown, and I am so very thankful to have you listening or watching on YouTube this podcast episode. Thank you, thank you. Where I bring on to this podcast wonderful and exciting authors who are here to share a little bit about themselves and their work with you. And today I have another fabulous author, Andrea Putting from Australia. So, Andrea, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Keith, for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Well, I appreciate it. I am too. So thank you, and thank you for taking time on an off day to do this. We created a special time to do this recording, and I'm grateful that we were able to get it done. So let's begin where I always like to begin with all the authors that are coming on the podcast, and that is a little bit about you as a person, because I want people to know who you are so they can better connect with your work.
Yeah, so I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I've been married for 41 years, have two grown children and two grandchildren who keep me very occupied. One day a week I have them and they just fill my life up as they do at that age. So that's the mainstay of my life. I'm also very involved in community work. I'm very everything in my life comes down to service. How can I be of service? I like to be able to help people and to be a guide in times of struggle or, just in life, try
Mhm.
to make life easier. I volunteer as a community chaplain in emergency situations. I'm the founder of Chocolate and Coffee Day for Religious Harmony, which is all about bringing people together and breaking down the barriers that divide community. And that's something that I love. I come to a point, it's like, well, I'll just keep on doing this. If people don't hear my message, that's fine, but I'm going to keep on doing this because it's something that I believe in. So that's at the heart of who I am. Um,
So
yeah.
you said you were emergency chaplain. Is this related to faith in any way specifically, or is this in a general chaplaincy? How does that working out for you?
Yeah. So it is and it isn't. So those who work in the emergency, it's called emergency ministries. They're from all different faiths, all different
Okay.
backgrounds, and some of them may not be listed as chaplains. They may be personal support. So basically, we offer personal support to people in emergency situations. So if there's a bushfire, there's floods, we will go and talk to
Gotcha.
people and be their support in those times. We do a lot of door knocking after tragic situations or emergency situations occur. We go into the community and just support people and make sure that they're okay and make sure that they have that support that they need
I
in
got you.
those times. So
So
yeah,
basically, you are a person with a heart of service. It sounds like to me, in whatever capacity that is. And of course,
yeah,
we need more of that, right? Across the
we do.
world for sure. Oh, I tell you, sometimes we just have to shake our heads at some of the ugliness we see at times. So I'm grateful that you are doing good things out there. Thank you for that. So let's move a little bit into your actual writing. So have you always been a writer, or is this something that came later in life, or what was the situation with that?
Yeah, I would have never in a million years growing up thought that I would be a writer or that I would write books. It was not on my radar at all, probably not even something that I was interested in.
Mm,
Writing was a necessary evil for school. And I do remember in high school, in my final year of high school, sitting there in one English class where we were told to write an essay, and I wrote nothing. I just sat there.
wow.
So yeah, I've been there. So it did, like I said, it didn't never occurred to me. And it wasn't until I was a mid to late mid 30s maybe, that I started a website, and that was way back last century in the dinosaur era of the internet.
Yeah. Oh, I've been around
And
for a while, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. So all of
Yeah.
these things that we have that make it easy to go online, put up
Right.
a website, create
Mhm.
social interaction, all that stuff was not there.
Amen. That's right.
So I started a newsletter, and so I trained as a naturopath, and I was putting out information about
Okay.
health. And
Okay.
so I was then writing articles, and I would send them to my newsletter, and it was so easy to build a newsletter in those days. You just say, "Hey, I've got a newsletter," and everyone would join.
Mhm.
Magic. And I was getting a lot of good feedback from that, and I found that I could actually write. So, and so it was all part of the business, is that I would just write and write and write. And at the time, the internet was flooded with my articles. So I hadn't really thought about writing a book up to then, and even for some time later, it didn't occur to me that I would ever write a book. And it was only after I had sold that business, gone on to be an employee with somebody else, and then I was still writing. I was writing articles and things for them, and writing training materials and all sorts of stuff. And then when I moved away from doing that, I was researching and looking for something else. I was looking at, how do we make the workplace more user friendly? Why is it that people are so miserable in the workplace, and
Mhm.
what do we need to do to change that? So that's what I was looking for. It wasn't The answer was not what I expected I would come up with, but then when I started Chocolate and Coffee Day for Religious Harmony, I found something different, and it was like, wow, what happens to us when we are more involved in what somebody else is feeling and doing? What happens to us when we give of ourselves for a cause beyond our own purpose? Because when I looked at Chocolate and Coffee Day, it was like, here I am making this point about prejudice and intolerance, and it's like, we should be accepting of all people. But here I was, a white Christian woman brought up in the white Australia policy era, which is kind of ugly. It was just only white Australians in the country. So I grew up with that, and I had never had the experience of prejudice or intolerance to me.
Right.
Yet this was something that I was fighting for. So it was kind of like, wow, what is this? What has it done to me to change who I am and my perspective and how I feel about myself? What if we combined this with business and how people feel about their business? And so I went on that exploration, and I discovered that through research, and then I started a podcast to talk to people about it. And I discovered that when people incorporate altruism in their business, or what I call a social mission, that it completely changes their business. Changes their outlook. It changes the way the business owners feel about the business. It changes the way the employees feel about the business. It changes the way the customer feels about the business. So it improves the productivity, the innovation, and the profit line. And I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
after I had done quite a number of podcasts, it was like, it's time to write a book about this. So
So
that's the
tell me a
story
little
that
bit.
led to.
So I totally agree with you. The fact that this idea of helping others and pursuing work for others and doing things to benefit others should be a part of life itself to some degree, certainly around business and entrepreneurs, which authors technically are if they
Mm,
are published authors and trying to sell their books. Then part of that too is, there are authors, for instance, who get caught in ego, and there are authors who go like, no, my main purpose here is to get my work out so that other people are impacted by the words on the page. Now, that can happen in nonfiction as you are writing, and it can also happen in fiction. It's that
Absolutely.
ultimate purpose of going, I want to help people do something, feel something, get something. And you chose to do that in this way. So tell me a little bit more about this coffee and chocolate situation, both by, I might add, I'm very fond of, probably a little bit too fond for both.
Yes, most people respond that way. It's like, "Oh, I like those." And
Hmm.
then I have a few strange people who say, "Oh, can you make it something else? Can you make it this? Can you make it that?" Because we don't all like chocolate or we don't all like coffee. And I go,
That's true.
it's the concept. I don't drink coffee myself, but I go for coffee.
Hmm.
We go out and have a coffee with somebody and sit and have a chat. So it's
Right.
about having that comfortable space where people can sit and have a conversation. It's creating that space because it's something that's familiar with everybody. Even if they don't eat chocolate, they don't eat coffee, well, you still sit down with somebody and have a conversation. So we're just bringing somebody different in. Now, chocolate is pretty awesome. It does have all of those endorphins that do help us to relax and to open up. And so it's pretty awesome to add that into the mix. But it did all start with an event that happened in Australia. It happened in Sydney, which is not where I live. But a gunman went into a chocolate and coffee cafe and held the the patrons and the staff hostage, and that resulted in two innocent people and the gunman being left.
Unalive.
Uh, yeah, and so the gunman was a Muslim, and he was claiming to do this in the name of Allah. He was waving an ISIS flag. It was that kind of timing, and so there was fear that there would be this retaliation against the Muslim community, but that's not what happened. Instead, 150,000 people went on social media with the hashtag I will ride with you. And they were offering to ride public transport, the train, the bus, and the ferry with Muslim people to ensure that they arrived at their destination safe because they were afraid to leave their homes.
Hmm.
So instead of there being an outpouring of hate and terror, there was an outpouring of love and acceptance. And it was like, well, why do we have to wait until there is a tragedy before we do express this? Why are we the silent majority? Why aren't we the ones standing up and say, we want love and acceptance in our community? We want a world where everyone is treated equally and accepted for who they are. So that's when I started Chocolate and Coffee Day. And so I kind of extend it now. Well, it started with religious harmony. It has elements across the board. So whatever that difference is between people, whether it's cultural, whether it's uh, race, sexualities into that now as well, and all sorts of things, whatever that difference is, let's listen to each other. Let's have these conversations and learn about each other. And I am extending that into coffee and chocolate breaks because why should we leave this for one day a year? So I'm
I
trying to
understand.
encourage people just to do that. Reach out to someone who is different. If in the workplace, if there's someone they just don't understand, they don't get them, let's sit down and have a chocolate and coffee break and just listen to each other and try to understand who we are.
Wouldn't it, I mean, one of the things that I see constantly is people yelling at each other, but nobody seems to be listening. And I see this across the board. And I guess I'm old enough to see this happening and just wonder why. I mean, I think we do need to have more conversation. All right, so let's shift gears just a little bit, and I want to make sure that we do get to the books because this is Book Talks with Keith. So let's talk about the books that you've written based on this calling, I would call it, upon your life. From that, you have written these books. So tell us a little bit about them and what they're about and what the purpose is and that kind of thing, if you would.
Okay, so we've already mentioned compassionate prosperity was the first one that I did. Compassionate prosperity when success is not enough.
Mhm.
So in that one's focused towards business. So, and I have stories in there from my podcast and from research and all sorts of things, which is encouraging business to look at what is there more about success. Now, one of the stories, which I tell two stories, one in one book and one in the other, but they're very similar, of of people who have reached the peak of their careers, of their chosen profession. So one of them was a billionaire and he had gone on to create amazing things. And then suddenly it was like he got to the peak and it's like, well, what's next? And felt like, well, life's over because I've reached all of my business goals. I've done it all. I've got all the money I could possibly want. I've got everything. And it's like, well, what next? And they get to the point that they're actually suicidal because they think, well, what else is there? And so the one that I tell in Compassionate Prosperity, he actually had a very wise mentor that said, hey, you've reached all of your business goals. Now you need to look at your spiritual purpose. And he did that, and he went on to he now builds whole villages in Haiti. So it just, until they find this compassionate purpose, this greater purpose than themselves, life is kind of empty and it loses that whole purpose. So it's when they're found that success in business is not enough to fulfill their lives. So, right through the book, I go through the different reasons that we go through. We need to have this social mission in business, and examples from my podcast, several different ways that people can businesses can get involved in social mission, and a bit of an outline of how a business would go, a guideline of how businesses can go about finding that social mission that's going to fulfill their needs. And so when I look at social mission, yes, it is good for society, and that's the basis of it, is becoming a providing community service. The way that I have directed the books, both of them, is what it does for you. So it's kind of an interesting twist on it, I think. So yeah, I talk about all those kind of things and the importance of us getting involved for our own personal sake, for the business sake, for our employees' sake. Um, and
So one of the, let me make sure I understand. One of them is about prosperity and one is about purpose. And so really quickly, just in one quick little summation, what is the major emphasis of, say, and I know you've touched on this, but I just want to make sure I get my head around the difference
yeah,
between the two books, okay? Because
okay,
I know because of our conversation, I think sort of they may have sort of blended. And I want to make sure that we separate them so that people know what the purpose is of each book, right?
yeah.
So let's start with purpose and then prosperity, or either way, you tell me and then tell me what each one, in a summation would be, if you can.
Yeah, yeah, that's fairly simple. So, compassionate purpose when success is not enough is directed towards business.
Okay.
Compassionate purpose, discovering a life of fulfillment, is directed more towards individuals.
Okay. So the prosperity one is toward businesses and the purpose one is for the individual.
Yeah,
Is that okay? Okay. I just want to make sure I got my head around it because I know that
yeah,
we were
no,
talking,
that's fine.
both of them are putting forth this message of compassion and caring and worthwhile um, calling. and work. So I just want to make sure that we made a distinction so people could understand what the
Yeah.
difference is between the two books. So, are you writing more? Are you going to write more? Or, what is the situation with your ongoing writing?
Yeah, my writing got waylaid last year with because I started a publishing company because after I self-published my own books, people wanted me to help them publish their books.
Mhm.
So that kind of waylaid me a little bit, but this year I'm making sure that I make time for writing because I need to do that for my own sense.
Sure.
But also there's a couple of other books that can sprout off from this concept, and they're ones that I want to explore more and create. So they will come. They will
I
be more.
gotcha. So you've got your hands in the publishing, helping other authors, which is very cool. I'm glad you're doing that because so many people, they have a story inside of them or information inside of them if it's a nonfiction, and so many people struggle with the technicalities of getting that work out to the world. And there are different types of services out there, folks. So you have to be careful. But I appreciate when people who are authors themselves take this on and begin to help other authors because there's a lot of value in that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So, is there anything else that you would like to share with the listener so that they could, that really drives home to them why they should go to, and we're going to put the links in the show notes and we're going to put the social media stuff there so you can connect with her. But why, if you could say, if you're sitting across from that coffee table, right, you're having that good coffee, or in your case, something else, in my case, good hot black coffee, plain black coffee, and you're having a good piece of chocolate, and you're sitting across from them, and you go like, you know what, I've written a couple of books, and this is what they are, and I think this is why you should grab them and read them. What would you leave with them?
What would I lead with or leave
what,
with?
what would you tell them to convince them to go purchase these books and enjoy the what you have to share with them?
Yeah. I would tell them that if they're feeling like there's something missing in their life, pick up the book and read it
Mm,
because what is often missing is this service to others. And I often say to people, I kind of have this thing, do you want to make a difference? Because I know that every person that I've ever spoken to wants to make a difference. It seems to me
yeah,
everyone wants to make a difference. So
yeah,
if you want to make a difference in the world, here is the place to start. And it's quite simple. Everyone can do it. And this is something that I talk deeply about in Compassionate Purpose, is that you don't have to be the person who starts the $1 million charity. If you have that ability and you want to do it, fantastic. But it can be in the simple things that you can be doing that make a difference.
yeah.
So pick up the book and read it, and you'll be inspired to find that's something that can become your social mission.
There you go. There's your cup of inspiration along with your coffee and chocolate today, that my dear friend. So, Andrea, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for having the heart of mission to help others, encouraging others to have that same heart and compassion and purpose, and seeking prosperity of the right way. And dear listener, we're going to make sure that all the links get in the show notes. If you'd like to check these books out and possibly grab one or both and enjoy them, then they will certainly be there for you to check out. And I really do appreciate you coming on Book Talks with Keith. And if you'll hang on just a moment, we'll do a couple of housekeepings once I hit stop. But dear listener, thank you so much. Each week, I am trying to bring to you different and exciting authors who have different callings on their life, different purposes behind their writing, whether it's nonfiction, as Andrea has, or if it's fiction. Everybody has a story to tell in some way or fashion. And I love bringing these folks on to share theirs with you. So thanks to Andrea for coming on. And for you, dear listener, listening, until next time, keep that reading going and let's share the love of books. Take care, my friend.